Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein. Hello, IndoctriNation listeners. This is your host, Rachel Bernstein, and I appreciate your support for the podcast. While Patreon helps to sustain the show, I understand that a monthly commitment isn't always possible. So, if you'd like to contribute in another way, you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. The link is in the show notes. Thank you so very much for your support. Hello, everyone. Today on the show, we have Jessi Hersey. She is a passionate and resilient author and cult survivor who has captured readers' hearts with her Pencraft award-winning book, Lit Soul, My Journey Back to Faith. A proud neurodivergent writer, she was someone who bravely shared her story of leaving the Twin Flames universe cult, an experience that nearly cost her everything, including her identity. Her upcoming memoir promises an unflinching look at the harm inflicted on the LGBTQ plus community by this organization. And when she's not writing, you can find her spending time with her beloved kitties, Max and Matilda, and her newest companion, a spirited puppy named Rosie. Together, they explore the world and find solace under the open sky. She's also on YouTube, and you can see her videos there, and we'll put a link in the show notes. There's also been Twin Flames documentaries, and I encourage you to be able to take a look at them so that you can find out for yourself what has been uncovered about this group and the people leading it. Here's Jessi now. It is my pleasure to have Jessi Hersey with me today. I have been waiting for this conversation for a while. I am so happy to be able to talk to you about your experiences and about really wherever you want to take the conversation. I know that you've had a specific experience in a specific group, which we will talk about, but that there is more to you than that. And I want to have you have a chance to talk about you and how being in this group impacted, as it often does, how you can sometimes feel about yourself, your whole self-concept. I would love for you to take a few moments and introduce yourself and let people get to know you a little bit. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jessi. Thank you so much for having me here. I am an author, first off. I write children's books and really anything. I'm working on my memoir right now. I have a poetry book, all on Amazon and soon to get on places that aren't gross like that. I am autistic with ADHD. I'm not your stereotypical autistic looking person or sounding. I can articulate. I am sometimes delayed in understanding when someone else is talking, but I can get mid-sentence after missing most of the time the first parts of sentences. I am brutally honest because I'm autistic, which is a truth of an autistic person in general. And saying someone, I guess, is autistic versus autistic person is preferred because we are human and we are made in society to not look human. And I think that's important because autism is me with ADHD. And I was not diagnosed until after I left the specific group we'll be talking about. I've been diagnosed for less than a year. And I looked really hard because I know how the system works in therapy, that you need to find someone not biased. So I looked for specifically a female. And I looked specifically for a female in her bio that looked like she was not biased and understood trauma. I looked for a little while and then found someone. But besides that, I love writing. I have my own podcast / YouTube channel, just like Rachel. I'm very thankful she asked me on here.
Thank you for that description. I find that a lot of people born female are underdiagnosed and are not diagnosed sometimes till later, or they need to do self-diagnosis. I think so many of the diagnoses we deal with, we see the markers are sort of the male presentation of that diagnosis more often than female. So there are a lot of people born female who feel they're sort of on their own and misunderstood. And I think sometimes that does lead to people wanting to get involved in organizations and groups where they have a sense of really feeling connected, feeling seen, feeling understood. If it's a cult group, eventually that is not at all what happens, but it feels that way. And it feels really nice at first and kind of intoxicating and like, I found where I can be me. And I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent. My background is in special ed, actually, but even in my practice, I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent. And I like also that you're informing people that you are not your diagnosis. So you are an autistic person. And I think it's important to be mindful of those kinds of monikers so that they are more humanistic. And so I'm just wondering, leading into you getting involved in this group, was that a part of it, feeling like you really wanted to feel understood or have a group that you could connect to?
Connection definitely played a part. I also was at the lowest point in my life. I had lost my job. I felt no worth and didn't see any purpose. It's that specific group does have a life purpose class, which I did buy eventually with their other classes, actually all of them. But I felt I was worthless and nothing. And then I found this group, which at first was hard for me to go into because they had a bunch of women leaving their husbands to be with their twin flame. And I am a believer in that one person for you. I still believe that strongly. So it was really hard for me because it was like a repeat of my family history, which we won't go too far into. But yeah, that's what brought up for me. And then they had the mirror exercise. That's really just gaslighting you into believing and feeling nothing.
Wow. Okay. So we don't need to get into a lot of your history unless you want to. And if it feels salient and if it feels connected to what we're talking about, you can certainly jump in there. I am familiar with Twin Flame. There was an interesting thing that happened years ago with people contacting me and saying there's this group and I feel like I'm losing my child to it. Or really, what I also heard was my child feels like they're losing themselves within it and they don't know who they are anymore. And if they are a he or a she, or if this is the life or the life partner that they would have chosen, or if they're being pushed. And so much of what I learned about this group, about the leaders who I feel like, well, I haven't met them in person. I've met them a million times just from doing this work for over 30 years. Those personalities present themselves over and over in my daily life in my office here, where they are slick and motivational, also very positive, sometimes very punitive, other times it's really hard to know what you're going to get, but they can make you nervous. And your life can be about pleasing them rather than really being able to be focused on if this is the decision that you would be making for yourself and if this is the life that you want. And a lot of people coming out of this group and others kind of feel like they had to come to, like they were under some spell while they were there and really lost themselves. I'm wondering, when you first got involved, what your impression was of the group and what your impression was of the leadership at the beginning.
At the beginning, because they do love bomb you a lot, I felt like I mattered. So I did post my stories in the group and I did the mirror exercise. I followed everything the leaders said to do in exactly how they say to do it. I'm autistic. I do, in fact, follow directions, regardless of what society thinks. And yeah, they just were really friendly. And the further I got into the group, the deeper, I guess, into the not so great toxic underbelly I got to get introduced to, and the red flags would start popping up. Like when I first started working for free before I became a coach, because I was ultimately a coach for a couple of years of my time there. But when I started social media, like on their Instagram account, that was really toxic. We had to sign up for specific times. We had to make sure to write, get specific hashtags. We had to research everything. So anything you would do for a job, so like social media manager, everyone, even though technically one was dubbed lead who was telling you what to do, but you're all doing the same thing technically. Yeah, you get to see the leaders for who they really are, because they will absolutely start yelling at you. This is before even hitting coaching, because coaching is when it gets really toxic, where they really tell you, you need to use this, you need to do the mirror exercise. We're right, you're wrong. You can try to prove yourself is right, but we'll just humiliate the heck out of you. No one stood up. The one time I stood up, I didn't understand why none of my supposed friends in the group were standing up for me, too. I was alone. So this was a coaching meeting when I think I brought it up in the Escape Me Twin Flame series, docu-series, but I don't know. He pretty much said, after I asked, why do we have to have a first place coach or coach of the month, second, third, fourth, if we're all equal? And it was a, how dare you question God, question me, question blah, 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 blah. And then his wife made fun of me too, because I still do this to this day, which I will never stop because I have fun doing it, which is peace. She made fun of that by going, oh yeah, peace, whatever, disrespecting your gurus. They pretty much do humiliation. But when that happens, that was a really huge red flag for me. The fact that no one, even someone I was close to who was part of the inner circle, didn't even stand up for me or say anything. And later that week, that person who was in the inner circle did, in fact, get kicked out. But she told me the reasoning. I was close to a lot of inner circle people, actually, at that time as a coach, that I knew a lot of stuff that I apparently shouldn't have known and didn't tell on them, which most people do tell on people in cults. So I guess my neurodiversity didn't tell on anyone.
It's interesting. And just so if people are listening rather than viewing this, you put your two fingers up, your pointer finger and middle finger like a peace sign and to the side. And just the fact that that's your thing. It was made fun of. It was mimicked and mocked by people who should not do that, should know better if they're supposedly spiritual and they love you. And these are the times that you start to really see who you're dealing with. And it can feel really hurtful. It can also feel really confusing and isolating. And I want to talk about that moment of people not coming to your aid, not standing up for you. Oh, it reminds me, actually, before I even say this, last night I was doing this former cult member support group, and I actually said so many people that these people have dealt with in their life have the how dare yous. And the how dare yous are this sort of righteous indignation. Oh, how dare you question me? How dare you doubt me? How dare you think I could potentially be anything less than a supreme something? And then, really you're dealing with someone who chronologically is their age, but developmentally is a child. But they just have not developed an adult persona where they can tolerate actually having someone say, ouch, to something that they did to them, or to say, I don't know if I agree with you. They don't have the courage or even just the interest. They don't have the personal strength to be able to withstand that. So they just boomerang it. They just have it come back on you so that you learn not to do that anymore. But so many people also talk about having a moral injury that in retrospect, they wanted to stand up for their friend, but they knew what would happen to them if they did, because the whole place is toxic. So everyone is needing to protect themselves. And so often, and this is something I talk about on the podcast, so often, usually more people than not in the room are having the same feelings that you're having and have been thinking about leaving for a while or have at least been unhappy. but people are pretending a lot of the time, or they're faking it till they make it. They're hoping that if they keep smiling, they'll convince themselves that this is a good thing. And so a lot of people who stand up, a lot of people who seem unhappy feel like they're the only ones there, and they aren't, but they just might be the only one who could say anything out loud. But still, it's very lonely. I'm thinking in that moment, it was very lonely for you.
Yeah, it was humiliating too. I've never forgotten it because that was my first really big red flag, but I knew I couldn't go. I felt stuck. And this wasn't the red flag that led to me leaving. Ultimately, it was in 2020 when who was not the person you see in the docuseries, the CEO at the time, who told me I was a male in a woman's body. That was the triggering point for me, at least. The big, huge red flag if I can't do this anymore. There was other ones in the past of making fun of past members that left and memes and stuff because I've never been a person who likes to do that. I've normally been the person that's made fun of or getting that. So I never actually joined. I just copied sometimes what someone else said so they wouldn't catch on to me not agreeing. I knew better than that. But fast forward to what I talked about the CEO at the time in 2020, because I know in 2021 is when the switch happened. In 2020, when all of that happened, yes, I am queer. So I was set up with another female, but a straight female. She had a child who was autistic. She's still there to this day. And I didn't know I was autistic at that time. I didn't know I had ADHD either. I had a feeling I had PTSD, but that came from being in the cult itself. Yeah, I've grown up queer, but I never admitted. I actually came out in the cult prematurely queer and not ready because you're supposed to claim your twin flame. So by claiming, you have to claim your truth, whether you're fully ready or not. That was part of their little game in there. So I also had to take in this disturbing thing, which it's not towards anyone else, just my own personal experience, because I've never felt I was in the wrong body, which that's the first sign. I know this because I grew up with trans friends and more. I'm close to many people that are trans, and I've been a part of many people's processes way before even joining this cult. Yeah, just the fact that they were telling me versus me feeling it for myself felt wrong, but I knew I didn't have a choice and I felt really stuck. I felt sick to my stomach and didn't want to follow through with it, but I did. I followed through with it for a couple of months before I actually left.
Okay. And I know that the leaders have been asked many times if they do this and they say no, or they do a diversionary tactic in an interview so that they don't admit to doing this. But you hear these stories over and over again of people really feeling pushed and people then having the sense that they have to take on a certain or agree to a certain kind of identity in order to please the leader or to show that you're courageous enough to do it. I mean, what was used as the motivator to say, okay, I'll give this a try?
Well, before we go into that, I highly recommend watching W5CTV. They had an exclusive, which I did a react video on my channel too, interviewing them, and they actually do admit to what we're talking about right now. But they absolutely used the diversion too. So you are right. They did that for years. But in this interview, because the reporter's amazing and I love Avery, she continued hitting them until they spoke the truth. I highly recommend watching that. I'm not going to speak too much to it because I rather more people watch it. And you can even, again, see me giving my information from being there myself in the group and being one of those people they're talking about. You can also watch my react video where I also leave both versions of it. So there's one where it's just exclusively both of them, the leaders speaking for 48 minutes. And then the other one's an hour, 30 minutes with receipts. So there's proof because Keely, Victoria, and Angie, who's Canadian, since it is a Canadian news station, they go into the story, but with receipts. So everything you hear them say, there's receipts to that, which they have no receipts to. And when I say receipts, proof, that's my way of saying proof. There's proof that they are liars, put it bluntly. But going back to what we were talking about, I feel this was an important thing for your listeners to hear.
Yeah, no, I'm really, really glad. And also the irony of you talking about how you're supposed to reveal all these things about yourself and be open and honest. And meanwhile, it takes a reporter having to kind of chip away and chip away and chip away just to get them to say, okay, fine. It's just so much effort. And that's one of the definitions to me of a cult. The rules only apply to the followers, the rules of needing to be open and honest and forthright and be an open book. And the leaders don't usually feel motivated to do that or feel the necessity. So go ahead. Yes, I'd love to hear more. So what was the motivation for you? What made you feel like, okay, I'll give this a shot, even though I don't know if this is me, but I'll jump in here to this relationship?
Well, leading up to that reveal, they had for months, I think 3 or 4 months, been telling everyone that you might be with a false twin flame. So they were setting the stage for months and months in advance. And there had already been a first phase of people that have gone through it. I was part of the second phase, your second group. And I know there was a third group. I know it hasn't been confirmed by anyone, but I trust myself on that one. I know there was a third group, but they're saying you need to let go of who you think you are because only God knows who you are. You need to let go of who you think your twin flame is because they might actually be false. The leaders said, well, we had false twin flame. They always used that one, though they never had an actual story that made sense. It was just word salad. But they just kept on reiterating and reiterating this. And this was after New York City when I had met them in person with a lot of others who you see speaking up to this day. We met them in person and they're just as horrible in person as they are as you see them when they are their true selves and being their true selves, which it's surprising that in the Canadian interview, they actually were, near the end at least, they didn't hold back their authenticity. But in the beginning, they definitely did. But they continued just this idea of you have to let go of whatever you think of yourself as being. Because I was female going in to the group, divine feminine, if we're going to use their terms. And then I became divine masculine suddenly in 2020 after 4 years, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of being there. I have no concept of time, so I apologize if I'm wrong. But yeah, so I had been letting go and I had a feeling, which I should have trusted, I was right. I had a feeling they were going to reveal to me who my twin flame was, being a soul sister. They did this for everyone in second phase of group, second group. I should just say second group. Since the first group, they weren't also with their soul sisters and soul brothers. So I had a feeling we were getting that too, but I didn't think they were going to tell me that you're a man. And a lot of the reaction, including to my twin flame at the time, she went, I'm so glad I'm not the male in the relationship. And we even had a hard conversation of, but you're straight. I even said that directly to her in our messaging because we were supposed to explore. We definitely explored. We shared music. We shared our interests. We talked about what we like, what we don't like. We went full on to everything they asked in their exploring. I even paid for, I don't remember what it was, but it was something in donations for something for the leaders, because you always donate to the leaders because you're supposedly getting something back in return when you're not. So I even did her portion of donation too. So I was treating it like we were an actual couple just to test it out. I was testing out this idea. I went to their divine masculine healing sessions and it always felt wrong and I always wanted to cry and leave. I made it to the point, which is in the docuseries, where I finally just told my mom, hey, I'm a man, pretty much. Her question was, is this you or is this them?
Good question.
She did not say, is this the cult? Because she had learned in the past we excommunicated when that happened. But in that case, I actually had to think about it.
I was going to ask what your response was, even your internal response to that.
Well, shock was first. And then it was, I don't know how to reply to this. And the fact, again, I'm delayed in my listening to someone auditory wise. I do better with words, paper, listening, but I do catch mid-sentence eventually. So I did process. So I don't know how long it was. I am going to reiterate, I have no concept of time. Maybe 5 minutes, And then I replied to her saying it's them. And then I told her I don't want to be in the group anymore, but I don't know how to get out.
Wow. So I want to come back to that phrase of that you don't know how to come out. And I'm going to write that down because I definitely want to come back to that. I'm wondering what you saw happening around you while you were in it. And I know you can't really talk about other people's experiences of it, but just through your eyes, did you see people seeming happy or seeming confused, seeming overwhelmed, seeming intimidated? In that environment, what were the emotions around you and what was it like to be there? What did you see?
Everyone was terrified. Everyone in the divine masculine, even those that were already starting transitioning due to a large push in being with and living with the leaders. There was a couple that were going quick and deciding to lead our divine masculine healing sessions. Everyone was terrified. Everyone was on the same feeling. No one said anything different from each other, but we didn't get the actual support we needed. We all got the reply of, well, then it's a block. You have a block to love. You have a block to your truth, your authenticity, your divine self. So we had to work on that in session together. It was a group, a divine masculine healing group. There was even like talking like, dude, man, your stereotypical dudes, though. Your stereotypical dudes don't actually exist, but that's okay. For them, they had only stereotypes. So stereotype male, stereotype female. If you can think of the 1930s, 1920s, you got it down. I was supposed to take care of my lady. I was being trained on how to be a male and what it takes to be a male. So be the household lead the house, let her take care of the kid, but still be a good divine masculine fatherly figure for her child, for our child. There's a lot. And even my twin flame, a week into us just talking, she said, I'll pay for your ticket to live with me out here. And I went, no, thank you. I'm good. Which was not the answer she wanted. She said, I won't say their names since we're sticking with leaders. The leaders said that we need to get together and we need to get together now. If you're not doing this, you're not following what God's asking. And I went, I don't think God's asking me that. I don't feel that way. And then her reply was, then you have a block to love, and that we have a block to love because whatever you have is the same one your twin flame has. That's part of their teaching. So her reply, which she was, yes, very kind, but also very brainwashed. She said that we'll work through this together. We'll do the mirror exercise. We'll get through it. So their number one insanity healing way is the mirror exercise, which is literally insane. And it's not a lifestyle, since I've heard them through the interview on the Canadian station. So I'm going to use their words. It is not a lifestyle. Twin flames is not a lifestyle. So if that's a love interest, that's not a lifestyle. That's just someone you love with a different title. You can even explain that too, the difference between love interest, lifestyle. What's the difference, Rachel?
Right. Love interest, right. It has to do with an emotion that you're having, has to do with chemicals that are being released in your system. A lifestyle is your identity, who you are, what you want in your life, what you want your life to look like. A lot of people confuse also being trans with being gay. It has nothing to do with sexuality. It has to do with identity. There are so many people who merge things, not realizing that they are apples and oranges. And I do want you to talk about the mirroring exercise because, wow, this is something that plays with your head. And it is something so often used in groups like this. Sometimes it's called different things, but often they have this kind of exercise. And before getting into that, I wanted to say, the idea that someone says that they're not speaking for themselves, they're speaking for God, or God is speaking through them, makes it sometimes impossible for people then to feel like they have the right to argue and they have the right to disagree. I love that you were like, nope, that's great. That you could say like, okay, no. But I can't imagine also the lack of humility that someone needs to have in order to say, oh, God speaks through me. and you need to listen to me because then you're listening to God. But also this idea, this other absolute, which is that if you are not wanting to go in the direction that we're telling you you're supposed to go in, there's something wrong with you. You have this block. And that's the same somehow for anyone who has this feeling that maybe they are wrong. And when you look at that psychologically, or even statistically, it can't be that everyone has the same problem right across the board, and that it's all that if they don't want this, there's something wrong with them. But also to get to a place where you feel like you can tell people that if you don't see it the way I see it, there's something inherently wrong with you. I mean, it's obnoxious, but also the hubris of that is just shocking, quite narcissistic in its way. And I'm sure you came across a lot of that where back to the how dare yous, we know and you don't. We're going to help you be able to get where we say you need to go, as though they're the expert on everyone and everything. I mean, I've met those personalities so often, but I still can't relate to it. It is so different from our wiring that it's even hard to imagine that someone could be this way. There are probably a lot of moments like that where you're thinking, who are these people? What species are these people? What do you think?
I agree with that, with everything you said. Can you repeat some of it? Just because I didn't get everything you were asking.
I'm just curious if you were wondering here, they're telling everyone there's something wrong with them, that they have this block or this blockage, which also is something that is said in so many different groups like this. Everyone needs to work on opening up these channels so that they can get to where the leaders want them to go and need them to go, as though the leaders are right about everyone and everything. Some people are going to believe that, but some people are going to look at the leaders like, how can you actually say that you are so sure? And so it can sometimes make people really wonder, like, who are we dealing with here in this organization? And in those moments, what did it make you wonder about them and who they are, even psychologically?
At least at the time of being in the cult, I more have had fear and worry for my own safety because of the threats that came with it. So you're choosing hell if you're not following this path that they're telling you to take, that you're going to lose your job, that they're going to hunt you, which they absolutely do. They did hunt me down when I left. And they did do a cease and desist on an article of me outing them. And they still do follow me. I actually have one of their followers subscribe to me on my YouTube channel, which I'm fine with. They're welcome to watch. They still hunt you down even after you leave. As I just told you, I have a YouTube channel. I still have a subscriber that is still, that I know of, though. I know that subscriber has gone in and out of the group because thankfully YouTube is starting to show me who my subscribers are. Unlike them, they're welcome to see whatever I say and post. I don't care. It's my life. In the group, your life is their life, pretty much. And they even, at this point in 2020, like before even the unveiling, they were asking, would you die for us? We had already fought for them. I brought that up in my article that I wrote, pretty much saying, taking their blame for them and covering their asses, butts, covering their butts and taking their responsibility, technically. Even in the Canadian interview, it takes them forever. Actually, they don't take any responsibility for anything. Yes, they admit something, but they don't take any responsibility for anything. They put it on their followers. They're still doing this to this day. It proved it in that interview that their followers are still giving them money for PR to look better than they actually are. They are still using their followers to cover themselves for what they did. They take no responsibility, and the mirror exercise ultimately makes it so you take responsibility for everything in your reality, yet they don't do it. The leaders don't do that. They say they do, but they don't do that, or else they would have admitted all the truths during Vanity Fair, during Sarah Berman asking them. They've had so many chances. Even the docuseries on Netflix, they had a chance. Even the Amazon series, they had a chance. They've always had chances, and they do not take any responsibility, no accountability for the mess and chaos and pain and suffering and PTSD they've given to others that have left. Because I got diagnosed with PTSD, but as my clinical psychologist who diagnosed me, who has her PhD, unlike them, said it was due to being in a cult.
Right. A couple of years ago with the whole series on Wondery, that was an interesting thing. I didn't know actually that the series was happening, and I wasn't familiar with some of the people's stories who were coming on, but I remember getting a call from Wondery saying this was going to be a certain part series, either 6 or 7 part, and they wanted to tack on an additional part so that they could ask me the how and the why. How does this happen? Why does it happen? Because what was happening was people were coming on and telling their stories, and then sometimes people were really supporting them, but other times the audience would think, I wouldn't have fallen for this. All the typical sort of posturing, like I'm superior to you kind of responses that unfortunately do happen at times when I think there isn't enough of an explanation about how this can happen to anyone given a certain set of circumstances or a perfect storm of circumstances. And I remember hearing a lot of audio from the leaders, especially him, and just hearing him be so cruel and saying things that were just awful. And she said some things too, but she often kind of mimicked him. But that this mirroring exercise is so perfect for their personalities of this redirection and projection. Redirection, projection, redirection, projection. You just have to take it all in. It's all your fault. It's all on you. And then that's like a perpetrator's playground. We can just do whatever we want, say whatever we want. And we now have a way of you needing to look inward always. So tell us about the mirroring exercise and how you do it, what it looks like, and what the goal of it is, and then also the outcome of it.
I'm actually going to use my cat as an example with what she does in my reality to show how simple of task. And you can take it from anyone. You can even use your boss. I've used that as an example in interviews too many times. So I'm using my cat, Matilda, aka Tilly. So it upsets me. So the upset can be frustration, or you can just say upset. I most of the time only wrote upset, but upset can be frustration, mad, angry, sad, depressed, any emotion you can think of. Apply that as an upset or just use the word upset. It upsets me. My cat, Matilda, keeps scratching my walls. So next step, you turn it on yourself. It upsets me. I keep scratching my walls. Third step. So this is the healing portion where you're supposed to give yourself what you need. So what would you need if your cat, logically speaking, what would you need if your cat was scratching the walls? So we're going to go logical first, and then I'll show you the healing portion they have.
Okay. So what would you need? You'd need a barrier so that the cat can't scratch the walls, something in between the cat and the wall.
Okay. So there's the logical. And then this is the healing method. So you're going to give, in this case, yourself, maybe you need some comfort and love and a hug. So this barrier idea of needing that probably won't come up in the healing process. So you just mainly give yourself, your childhood self, what you need here. So you love yourself, and then you're supposed to see within your reality, suddenly the cat will stop scratching the walls. I'm using their logic, fully their logic. So that's supposed to be the outcome because you can control your reality. Just like I've used the idea of if 2 cars crash into each other, but it's not actually your fault, the mere exercise will make it your fault.
Right. And it does that at the beginning of it, the second part of it.
Mm-hmm. And you continue deeper with the second part of it. So there is a fourth part they don't always talk about unless you're in the group itself. So the fourth part is if you don't feel peace, and their definition of peace is nothing, but they'll tell you whatever it is you think it is. But if it's not what they think it is, it's actually nothing. They tell you go deeper. So go deeper into what you need here. Do you need loving from parents? Do you need some part of you healed? So you just go deeper into the idea of what do you need to heal that. So that's the fourth step that I haven't heard some of my fellow friends that are ex-members speaking up talk about. There is a fourth step, but only if you're in the coaching and inner circle do you know about the fourth step?
Okay. So I can see how from the beginning, this takes you off course. And then you go down that rabbit hole endlessly. It still is not going to keep your cat from scratching your wall. It's still not going to solve anything. And the leap to you're scratching your wall is a very odd one. But I think people feel like they have to agree to that in order to move on to the next part or to go deeper and to learn something about the self. But you're not scratching your wall. And so I think also looking at it logically, that was probably a hard sell at times to think, why is it that I have to believe that I'm doing this? Was that hard to have to take on?
For me, it was easy because they said you're taking accountability, irony in this, accountability for your own actions by doing the mirror exercise. So accountability. So logically speaking, because at the time when joining the group, I definitely had logic. When I had been in it for a year, logic was dead. But that idea of accountability, because I felt I hadn't taken accountability in my life, I went, oh, cool. So there's a method for me to take accountability for my life. It's really not. I even had Dr. Robin Stern and another queer clinical psychologist, Dr. Shannon. They both looked at the mirror exercise too. And they right away said the turning on point is definitely a point of toxic. And you shouldn't have that in therapy in the first place.
Yeah. Also, the redirection and projection of you needing to take accountability. It's like so many of these leaders who will tell people they're acting outside their integrity. If I hear integrity or accountability one more time, I swear, like every day, because the way it's used to skewer the followers or the members and to have them be so self-critical and to have them accept that responsibility. But the leaders don't take accountability. The leaders don't show integrity. They'd be acting very differently if they actually took accountability for anything. And it would be a lot healthier of a group, actually, and very different of a group. Okay, so the mirror exercise overall, just to kind of finish up this part of it, what do you feel like it did to you? Did it confuse you? Did it make you more self-critical? What happened there?
Well, in the beginning, I believed it was working, which it was really just life being life. But it wasn't anything magical or manifesting in my reality because they used that. If anything, it made my self-worth, which fact, autistic people in general don't have a large self-worth, not due to being autistic, but due to society. But it made it lower than it already was. That's the best way of putting it. So I had zero self-esteem due to the mirror exercise. The mirror exercise brought me down from being a human being to no logic and zero understanding of myself any longer and zero confidence in myself too. So not trusting myself. Trying to think of other examples of that. Mainly not trusting myself. It made it hard in my daily life because I, just like you, I work with kids. I like using the word special needs. I know not everyone within the area does that, but I was a child myself with special needs, so I'm taking the word back. And like 90% of the population like taking that word back. But being a child with special needs, your self-confidence is ripped from you from the start anyways. And they took what little amount I had left with no remorse, no feelings, not love either. They do not spout anything love. They are very good at hatred.
Wow. They're very good at hatred. I'd love for you to describe what that means, how that shows up in the group or with them.
My personal belief, I can't say because I'm not them. And unlike them, I'm just saying from my personal perspective and seeing. So how they feel is how they feel. Leaving it that part there so people know that.
Very much not like them. Yes.
Yes, but from my personal experience, it seems like a possibility, which was brought up after the docuseries, which I agree with some of the commenters that commented to ex-members such as myself too, of maybe, just maybe the male leader is gay and putting that on other people. And maybe he feels he's in a different body. It's possibility to be putting that on someone else if you hate yourself that much. You bring that hatred towards others. And it's not really an inclusive space either. Being a queer person myself, the way they treat someone who is actually trans, because there were actual trans people that actually felt they were in the wrong body, the way they treat them is not inclusive, and you are sidelined. So queer people are still treated the same way they are in society in that group. I was sidelined. The only ones they push up are if it can feed their money house. So if it looks like they can, like the first, which they were on the Amazon docu series, which I also worked with them too. The two females and one getting called out saying you're a male, which they did this in their Twin Flames Ascension school series. That's when that call out happened, and those clips are from. And they were their first harmonious union. So they used them and put them up. The next group, thankfully, has been a big advocate and speaking up a lot. I won't say her name, but she's been speaking up a lot. And I'm thankful for that, who is part of the inner circle too, because both of them were also part of the inner circle too. That spoke up in the Amazon series. People seem to not care or pay attention to that. But we have multiple people from the inner circle that have spoken up that are ex-members. But the first couple that counted, they had other ones too that you never hear about that were in the Twin Flame Ascension school that dropped, that supposedly had harmonious union, but suddenly broke up and were no longer harmonious. They never go into detail if you notice, even if pay attention to the most recent, I guess it's like a documentary, the hour and 30-minute interview version. They don't go into why certain ones aren't with their supposed twin flames, since that's your guarantee, which Amazon highlights is you're guaranteed as twin flame. I was guaranteed that, and I followed all their rules and did everything they asked, but supposedly I didn't heal is what's in the Canadian documentary. They say all the ex-members who are ex-members, we supposedly didn't heal. I feel way better than I did when I was there. I feel more logical. I feel clear of mind, more confident. Actually, I got a promotion in my job that I work with kids of special needs. And it's due to my confidence, because that was why I was never promoted in the first place, is confidence. So yeah, I feel a lot better out of than in it.
It's so interesting. In so many of these groups, I find the language it's like every day is opposite day. That when people talk about this ascension, and I've heard love ascension, soul ascension, a lot of ascensions in different groups, and that when people are taught that they have ascended, they often feel more like crap, pardon the expression, than before. This is really, I was moving up because I don't feel it. I am exhausted. I'm unsure about who I am. I haven't eaten. I haven't seen my family. I don't have a career left. I don't have money left. Like, how was this moving up? And also for people to be told that they are just all the words, right? All the words that somehow they are doing the right thing, or they're somehow supposed to be happy, but they're really miserable. And that they are taught that they are reaching enlightenment, but they have never been more confused, feeling like they're not at all connected to the self anymore. It's a very confusing thing, just trying to keep up with all the different, not only the language, but the goals. What is it supposed to feel like when you reach this? I don't think it's actually supposed to feel this horrible. But then there isn't anyone to talk to about that. Who would you go to in the group if you were thinking, this doesn't feel right?
In that case, you don't really have any safety net in the group, because they'll just tell you to do the mirror exercise and tell you that you have a problem and you need to fix that problem. That's the best way of putting it, because you're trained, even as a coach, you're trained what to say. If someone says, well, I'm thinking about leaving my husband, or I'm thinking about leaving my wife, or I'm thinking about, we did have suicidal people. We had a lot of people. We had a lot of trainings in them and how to avoid and word salad. We were supposedly a salesperson. They used a car salesman as an example in one of our trainings for coaching, that you are a car salesman selling love, that you are selling this product that can heal everyone. So can heal autism, can heal cancer, what else could we supposedly heal? Oh, and bringing people that are meant to be together in every lifetime together. Your twin flame, your ultimate lover, your person who's better than a soulmate. So part of the whole pitch and idea is that this person is yours and is a hard person to get to because they're ultimately you, but in another gender, sometimes not. And if you're in a same gender relationship, one of you is a divine masculine, the other one's a divine feminine. So no matter what, it's male and female. It's very straight, cisgendered thinking, which it's by white, straight, cisgendered people. And you hardly see anyone. I like that in our Netflix docuseries, at least we get someone who is not white, which is great, who was in a higher role there too. But if you were anyone who's part of minority, so I'm included in that, even though I'm white-skinned, I am lucky to be white-skinned. I don't like what's still happening today to those that do not look like me. So I am thankful for that. But they treat you the same way society does. So you are still ultimately pushed away. Queer people do experience at least that part of discrimination, same as, which people don't bring that up, people with disabilities are equally treated that way too. But of course, color does play a role and get worse treatment than those who are not the look that they're looking for. But just to go back into that, this specific cult does still treat you that way, but they do it with rose-colored glasses, since I know that term very well. They do that with treating you with love bombs and pretending like they care and pretending like they're listening to you when they're ultimately just thinking, to me, it felt like, in their head of what move can I do next to turn it around on you? And you're taught that in coaching. What next can I do to turn it around on you? Like, I'm going to bring this up since it's going to be in my memoir anyways. I was homeless for about a month when I was with them. And the thing that I was told by each of my coaches, one of them, actually, they were all part of the inner circle. Mostly all my coaches were part of the inner circle that I eventually worked with as a coach myself. They all told me that this is your fault that you have no money. This is your fault that you can't afford anything. And you're not taking the necessary steps with the mirror exercise to heal it out so it shows in your reality. This is your fault. We don't want anything to do with you. They actually excommunicated me for a couple weeks due to that. And thankfully, I had a friend from the past that gave me a place to stay for at least a night. And eventually, I did get in contact with my mom again, eventually, after a scary experience with a person that wasn't great. That was a roommate. So I was for at least a month. It was probably less than, but it feels like a month to me. And reiterating again, I have no concept of time. And that's how it went there. I only got communication back again 2 or 3 weeks, I think, after not having a place to stay and losing everything I had. So I definitely know how it feels to lose things. I lost my home in the Marshall fires in Colorado. So I've lost things multiple times. And yes, being an autistic person, I do have objects like my fidget right here. I'm not ashamed of it, therefore I'm showing it.
Is that a turtle?
I love Pokemon, so...
Oh, Pokemon. Oh, yeah.
This is Charmander.
Charmander.
But Charmander's my best fidget, so...
Okay. And Charizard's cool too.
Yes. They shame you for your reality instead of helping you. At that time, I didn't care about the mirror exercise. I was asking them, what can I do? I've asked every place I could possible to help me with covering what they were asking for. I had lost my job because I had been working. This was in Florida. I had been working at an ice cream shop as a manager. I lost that job. I didn't have anything to give. They weren't giving me my last paycheck. They never did. What else was happening? A lot of bad stuff at once was happening. And all they were telling me is do the mirror exercise and make it happen. And I was telling them I'm doing everything within my reality I can. I had called, I had emailed, I had done everything. I even went to a LGBTQIA plus center. I couldn't drive there because I had sold my car in California and I had rented a car that I could no longer afford because it just didn't work and didn't logically make sense. So that was already sent off. So I had no way of trying to get there. So I just called the center and talked to, he was a very, very sweet guy. He tried helping me. He said, there isn't much I can do at this time. I don't know what I can tell you. I had told him all the steps I had taken. I just need help. I'm not going to have a place to stay. They didn't do anything for me. Just to give more perspective, they didn't do anything for me. as in the cults. Everyone else around me, at least the person I called, he felt so horrible because he didn't have a resource. I hope he does now at this time, but at that time, there wasn't a resource for a queer person who lost a job due to being queer. At this time, it was definitely due to being queer and out about it because I didn't come out right away. I waited until later in time. Normally, I don't ever come out. Now I'm out no matter what, even where I work today. At least there are actually inclusive, but not everywhere is inclusive and now getting worse.
And now getting worse, right? And the whole way that autism is now seen, and I mean, how it's being talked about. And even in the group, when you were saying that they could cure autism and cure cancer as though autism is a disease. I mean, it's very interesting.
When it's genetics.
Right? It's like these spoken and also unspoken messages that you get. The othering of it is really quite incredible, but also the lack of compassion and the lack also of having other options for you. If I knew that I was doing a kind of counseling with someone and throughout the time they were with me, they lost their job, they lost their self-confidence, or they lost their relationship, they had nothing, I wouldn't say, well, just keep making more appointments with me because that's clearly helping you. I'd hopefully take stock and think this is probably not what they're really needing right now. And let me see if I can find them an appropriate referral. But similar to Scientology with auditing, just come back for more of it, even though you're getting migraines and even though you are miserable and even though it's making you confused about yourself. But let me just give you more of this pill that's poisonous to your system, clearly, because your life is falling apart. I think they just didn't have other tricks up their sleeve. I think just the fact that they didn't just sit with you and say, we're so sorry that you're in this situation. This must feel terrible. What can we do to help? And a lot of the reason that people don't have money in the group is because they gave it to the group and they're living very well off the money from people giving over everything they have and flaunt it and really have a lot of entitlement about that. But I do want to get to two things. One is that you said this really interesting line that you didn't know how to leave. And that is something really important, I think, to talk about even briefly, because there are people listening to this podcast now who are in that same situation. And this is part of the reason that they listen, or they have loved ones who they're hoping they can try to help leave, and they're not quite sure how to orchestrate that or what they need even emotionally to help them. So, and then I want to talk about life now outside of it and what you're working on and what you're doing. What made you feel like you didn't know how to leave, and how did you eventually leave?
Honestly, the moment I talked about with my mom, she's the one who, because again, logical thinking doesn't exist at this time when you're still in the group. After I said, I don't know how to get out, her words were, why don't you just block them and leave? And I went, okay, but I'm going to have to do it slowly. I don't want to do it slowly, but I'm going to because they'll catch on to what I'm doing. So there came the plan, which I got impatient, which I'm going to blame my ADHD, even though it probably was just me being impatient. But I got really impatient and actually did it within the 5 hours after our conversation and me crying and that entire situation. But I first blocked the leaders, then I blocked the inner circle, blocked everyone who I thought was my friends, and I left. There was still cleanup afterwards, which they followed me the day after I did that, which I had to block those people too. So there was a following after. So there was like a week or two afterwards of still cleaning up the followers that wanted to report back to the leaders, which I didn't clean up all of them clearly, but they also were making new accounts. Actually, it even shows on Instagram a lot of the people I had originally blocked have new accounts now. So they are still making new accounts to this day. So there's no getting around them listening. They'll probably listen to this interview too. There's no getting around that. They stalk you. They are taught and trained to stalk you. So in my personal opinion, they do that and experience what I'm talking about. They do that. They stalk you. So there was cleanup. And I guess, again, if we're back to present day, it's still happening regardless. So I, as a autistic person, pay attention to details. So I'm aware of things that maybe someone who isn't a neurodivergent would be aware of.
And when you say they're taught to do this, this is something that you were taught or you saw people being taught to stalk others?
As a coach, which I never followed through with this because it felt wrong to me, but I never said I wasn't doing it because if I outwardly said that, I would be in trouble. But you were taught to follow anyone who left. So anyone who left, you go subscribe to their YouTube channel, you go find them. Well, you first block at least social media, certain ones, and then you follow them other places. And then some would unblock. And eventually they played the role when they had too much heat on them of, oh, it's okay if you don't block them. They did that for one short time period, but otherwise they do ask you to block everyone all over social media, but follow them and subscribe in certain areas, such as YouTube would be a place, or listening to anything that has to do with them, such as podcasts or where else? I guess on television too, because now it's television. That's their way of doing it. And they do. And like I said, they'll probably listen to this one.
I think that when people listen to things like this, who are leaders of groups and they want to come after you, I don't know if they realize how much they are revealing about their true selves by doing that. They think they're attacking you, but they're exposing them. And what they're saying is, we don't want to have a mirror exercise, basically. We don't want to have to look at ourselves. We don't want to have to look and see about what we've done. So we'd rather turn it all around and blame you, even though you're the one who we've made suffer. And I think a lot of people who have signed a lot of things in cults, like non-disclosure agreements or non-disparagement agreements, which I'm now hearing about, when you're saying this happened to me, that's not disparaging. That's not putting someone down necessarily. That's not defamation. If you say this was my experience, you're just stating facts. But I know that a lot of people are going to be worried about, well, I signed something that says no disparagement, but it really isn't if you say this was me and this is what they did and this is what was said and this is the after effect. I'm wondering, now that you've left, how you're doing, how you've worked to regain a sense of confidence or self, and what's been helpful on that front.
Honestly, starting my channel was helpful. I did get help because I do feel it's important. And I want to stress that the importance of seeing someone who has a PhD like yourself, who gets, I guess, checks and balances happen for those who have a PhD. Real life checks and balances. It's not made up by people who do not have this. I was with a person who that's their forte, is those who are coming out of cults and survivors and working with them. And they were also a survivor themselves. I had that for a couple months, I think. She said I was better pretty quickly and seems ready to rock and roll. From there, starting my YouTube channel, interviewing people, and where it's become now, well, it's also a podcast. When it becomes a podcast, I don't know yet, but it will happen on Tuesdays when I share it. And then my continuous of YouTube stuff on Saturdays. Yeah, just speaking to other people that are like me, because I didn't know how many people existed that were like me, that were survivors of trauma, of cults, of family stuff. There's a lot of neurodivergence out there. There are neurodivergents with clinical psychology degrees. There are neurodivergents own their own business, just like me. I do own my own business, but I'm in the works of getting it better prepared. I own a publishing company, but it's not your typical, let's publish a book. It's, you can publish a book, you can publish a YouTube series, you can do a children's series. It's whatever the individual sees. So again, the individual, they don't do this in the group I was in. So whatever the individual sees in telling their story or a made up story, that's still their story. That's what my publishing business is. It's inclusive for, I'm technically towards anyone who's minority, because we don't get enough of their stories. We don't get enough stories like my own, who is part of minority. People tend to cover that up or press it aside. Yeah, it exists, but it's not as wildly known. I'm learning there's a lot more kindness out there than I expected. So I feel like I've grown a lot, honestly, but it was thanks to what I've been doing on YouTube, the clinical psychologists that helped me when I first got out, the support I've been getting from family, because now they're more of you do you, which before I went into the cult, they were not that way. Just a lot of changes around me, and I feel more independent, and I'm following what my actual dreams are.
Wow. That's really lovely, actually. Really lovely. And I wonder also when you're talking about people being licensed, yes, there are people who are licensed, some of whom are not kosher
True.
in terms of their personalities. But it does help if you feel like it makes you feel rest assured that you're going to meet with someone that has a board, that has people looking over what they're doing, but also that there's a certain ethical guideline that they are supposed to follow by, and that there's a certain level of training that they've had. And I think it is important to really look at someone's credentials and also maybe even talk to people who have worked with them or read some testimonials here and there to get a sense of if they are someone who really understands this work. There are a lot of people who will come to the support group that I do and say, I was in a whole variety of other support groups that were sort of like what I needed, but it was just more akin to, it didn't quite fit. And so you don't have to feel like you have to settle, even though there are too few resources in this world that I'd like there to be more. I'm wondering also about this idea of meeting with a psychologist who, after a few months, said, I think you're okay. That is so different from any kind of cultic system. Because if it's a business, they're not done with you. There's always something else that you need to work on, something else they've suddenly noticed that you have wrong with you. They're at different levels, and they're really, I think, only done with you if you've either run out of money or they think it will threaten some kind of PR for them if you stay. But I'm sure it felt nice and kind of normalizing to have a professional say, I think you're good for now. How nice and how different that must have felt.
Honestly felt really good. I actually talked to her because at that time I wrote Who You Are. This is one of my children's books that was inspired by the fact that I was told who I was. And I wanted children at a young age to learn you're allowed to be who you are. Of course, I have a support system in the book as a teacher to go to, but that was written during that time in 2020. There's a second one, Colorless, which is Black Lives Matter, part of the children's series of mine. And the main character is, in fact, me. I'm not an author that denies that. Her name is Jalen, and you just get to see her grow a little. I have a third book, but right now I'm working on the super gay. So my pronouns, children's series. I have one book out. The second one is in the process right now it takes like a year for the artist to get all of them done. One page takes over a week to do in the first place. Yeah. And then I have my memoir I'm writing. So I'm going more into the queer field of things. I already have my queer poetry. I have super gay. My two books I just talked about play as straight, but they're not really straight because I'm queer. So the characters, no matter what, are going to be within that. So even though it looks straight, because I count my Who You Are series as the looking straight series, it's done by a queer author. So it's automatically not straight.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm bringing more people with disabilities into my stories purposely because I guess my first two that look straight, I'm disappointed in myself for not remembering to put someone in a wheelchair, to put an autistic character in there. So I'm trying to add more diversity, especially during this time. In my children's books and even in my memoir, I have the queer clinical psychologist I told you about. I want to support more queer and more that are minority. So that's something exciting that I'm now doing since getting out of the cult that I'm proud of and getting more queer voices on my YouTube/podcast channel, which is partially an actual YouTube channel, partially an actual podcast.
That's so great. It is so interesting to see the direction that you're going in, which is so much about checking in with you and about being and about expressing and about really being able to be attuned and have a sense of knowing this is who I am. And this is the face I also feel like I want to show to the world because it's one that I feel is me and the one that I've developed without someone pulling me or defining me and telling me who I am. It is a question I get asked a lot from people who have left cults, people who were born and raised in them, people who got involved later on, where they say, I don't know who I am, or I don't know who I am anymore. if they got involved at some point later on. I don't know what I feel and if it's okay to feel that. And I don't know what I like and if it's okay to like that. It is a very confusing place to be in your mind. So I'm so glad that there is now much more clarity and you can express yourself with that clarity. And it has been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you letting me tell my story.
Of course, anytime. Hope to talk to you again.
You too.
One more thing before you go. Thank you so much to Jessie. It is really an amazing thing. When I've talked to people who have been involved in this group, they've talked about how absolutely disorienting it was and how, well, they were supposed to somehow be finding out to a greater degree who they were and who they're supposed to be with, what their life is supposed to look like and feel like, and who's supposed to be in it. They often left feeling even more confused than when they began about who they were and who they're supposed to be with and what their life is supposed to look like. And they then had a lot of catch up to do just to get back to the disoriented place they were already in when they first got involved. It is very difficult when people are open to people leading them, and the people leading them take them often down this rabbit hole. And then they feel like they just need to go on automatic pilot and just follow what the leaders are saying, which makes people disengage more and more from their true selves, even though the leaders will try to convey the message that by following the leaders, they're getting closer and closer to their true self. But no one really knows your true self as well as you do. And that's an important thing to always remember if you can. There's something also debilitating about love bombing. So Jessie talks about being love bombed when she first got involved in this group. And being love bombed is very different than actually being loved. It is being manipulated solely through the use of affection and affirmation and compliments, and something that actually feels so wonderful that it's hard to notice that it's a manipulative tactic when it's happening to you. And in fact, even if you do notice that it feels like too much too soon and it's a little too syrupy and saccharine sweet, and the compliments seem to be coming out of nowhere and these people barely know you, there are a lot of people who say, you know what, I had an inkling that something was happening here that didn't feel quite right and didn't feel quite natural, but I didn't want to see that it was a manipulation because it felt so good, or because I was so hungry for it, because I'd never had it before, or I hadn't had it in a long time, or I hadn't received it from people who I thought I respected and looked up to, and that made it even sweeter. When you don't know that the envelopment that you are experiencing, the emotional hugs that you are getting, the amount of positives that you're receiving are actually this very well-controlled method of deception, then you will actually think, as Jessie did, that you suddenly are wonderful and you suddenly, to quote her words, matter. It's a very sad thing in the world that we live in that sometimes we don't receive the compliments we need or we want. And so when you go into something emotionally hungry, you don't realize actually that the meal that you're being given to feed you could be poisonous and it could be a trap. And so when you feel like you suddenly matter, you then will feel like you're being given something you've never been given before, and that you need to then feel indebted to the people who have given it to you, and you need to somehow give back through this idea of reciprocity. They made me feel like I'm something. So I'm not going to leave them. I'm not going to say no to making a donation. I'm not going to say no to recruiting other people. I'm not going to say no to making sacrifices and not talking to my family or my friends anymore because they gave me something that I just can't put a price on. They gave me something worth everything. And the problem there, of course, is that they didn't give you anything. They actually got you to give them something, which is your devotion and your feelings of owing them. And people hold themselves up to a standard of wanting to be good people, wanting to give back. And so people will give back for this thing that they don't realize is a trap and a manipulation. It's also true, as Jessie was talking about, that you as a follower are held to this standard, that you have to take accountability for everything. You have to be responsible for everything. You have to be someone who is willing to see your part in everything. If they could make you feel like you owe them for them giving you what felt like love and support and really being seen for the first time, then you are going to feel like you can't leave because you will not be holding yourself accountable. You will not be doing the right thing. Cult leaders actually have an easier job than we think. They set a certain kind of wheel in motion, and they can just sit back and watch it spin. They can make people feel that they have to take accountability. They have to take responsibility. They can make people feel that they owe them for what they're giving them, that they couldn't receive anywhere else and they hadn't yet received anywhere else. And so people then work very hard to repay and to show their devotion and to show their appreciation. And leaders will sit back and enjoy the show. It's very cruel and it's very selfish. And I'm so glad that Jessie finally was able to become free. Take good care. Talk to you next week.
Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctriNation Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.